Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Yesterday, July 30th, was National Whistleblower Day. DOJ has a new program that offers payment to whistleblowers who submit reports of antitrust violations that are later proved successful. But the program is complicated, with lots of conditions on those payments. So here to help us sort through the details is partner at Shepherd Mullen and co-leader of their Antitrust and Competition Practice Group, Ann O'Brien. Ms. O'Brien, thanks for joining me in studio today.
Thank you.
There's a new whistleblower rewards program that relates specifically to the Postal Service. Can you tell us a little bit more about this program?
Yes. So the program that was announced on July 8th is actually a partnership between the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division and the U.S. Postal Service. And it's meant to reward antitrust whistleblowers.
And so why did we need to create this program?
Well, that's a great question. In some sense, the ability for people to report antitrust conduct to the Postal Service and DOJ has always been there. There is citizen complaint lines. You can go in and report to the FBI or DOJ Postal, antitrust crimes, antitrust offenses, anti-competitive conduct. So it's been there. But I think this is about incentivizing people through payments, through monetary rewards, to report that conduct.
And why is the Postal Service integral to this antitrust reporting?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that the reason is that this is an attempt to get resources and support from the Postal Service for complaints that involve antitrust. And the Postal Service has a unique provision that allows them to recover some rewards for criminal matters involving the Postal Service. So they partnered together to bring this program, but it's really meant to get people to go in and report things that they think are anti-competitive, bid rigging, price fixing, market allocation, and they could do that through other vehicles. This partnership with the Postal Service is unique in that it has to have a postal hook. And that's a big question I have is how much of a postal hook does it have to really constitute something that someone will get paid for under this program?
This just seems incredibly complicated to me. Could you give us an example of what a case might be that would be eligible under this provision?
I think it's a little complicated too. So typically, and if you go on, there's a big program page on the Department of Justice Antitrust Division's website, and it explains what types of anti-competitive conduct usually are considered antitrust crimes. Bid rigging, price fixing, market allocation. You see a lot of those involving harm to government agencies that might be buying a product or involved in a bidding process. So that's one angle. It doesn't have to be government procurement related, but that's an angle they're going for here. So to me, the very simplest example, and we've seen some cases like this, although they're not that frequent, would be, let's say the Postal Service needs to buy bottled water for its mail carriers. It's hot out in Washington, D.C. right now, so I feel like people need water. So they put out a request for bids, or they say, we need to buy water. And what should happen is that people bid competitively. So anyone that wants to sell the Postal Service bids for that, says, here's how much we charge for water. But what if they don't? What if competitors say, let's figure out, you take this one, I'll take the next one. Or you sell them water, I'm going to stick with all the sodas. So that agreement, if there's an agreement among competitors to determine among themselves who will bid rather than the competitive process, that could be bid rigging. So if that were to happen and the Postal Service is harmed, to me, that's a pretty clear situation in which this applies.
But that also seems to be a pretty narrow space. Why did they think they needed to initiate a rewards program to help motivate people to submit these kinds of whistleblower reports?
That is very narrow. And I think therein lies the big question, which is how broad will they go with this? So I think the Antitrust Division was looking for ways to incentivize people to report this conduct. They had this ability to partner with the Postal Service. So here's a big thing. So a lot of times when you have that price fixing, that bid rigging, competitors getting together, they use the mails. So they mail payments, bid information. It used to be a lot more mail, now wires and digital, obviously. So it's very typical that antitrust crimes, price fixing or bid rigging, might involve use of the mails in the implementation, and that's broadly applied. So I think there's some reaction in the antitrust bar that I'm a member of that basically says this could be a lot of things. I'm not so sure because, as you said, there's an MOU that lays out a lot of criteria criteria. I think there's a lot of discretion. The language is interesting because it says the Postal Service has to be affected, but it does say they don't have to be monetarily harmed. So it doesn't have to be a direct dollar for dollar. But how broad will the Postal Service and the Antitrust Division, who essentially decides who gets the money and how much, how broad will they go? If they go broad with this, then it could constitute a lot more conduct.
I'm speaking with Ann O'Brien. She's a partner at Shepherd Mullen and co-leader of their Antitrust and Competition Practice Group. You have a lot of experience in antitrust space. We've talked a little bit about how complex this description of the problem is. What do you see in terms of the pros and cons of this program itself? Is it going to achieve the results that they're hoping for?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. And yes, I worked at the Antitrust Division, Department of Justice for 20 years, and I've been in private practice since, and I've seen all angles of antitrust. They call them cartels, not the kind of drug cartels, but antitrust, anti-competitive cartels, cartel conduct. I've seen all kinds. And so will it be successful is really a question. I will say when I was at the Department of Justice for a long time, historically, the leadership of the Antitrust Division's criminal program was pretty resistant to paying whistleblowers. The idea you don't want to pay your witnesses. We didn't want to undercut a voluntary self-disclosure program that we had. So we were pretty resistant to these programs. There has been a clamoring for it because the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and other agencies do have these paid rewards program. I think really it's going to be dependent on how strict of a reading of these complex and discretionary criteria that you're absolutely right. It's a lot to take in. How broadly they're applied. If the complaints start rolling in and they start paying out money for things that aren't just bid rigging for water, this could be a game changer in terms of incentivizing more reports and the Antitrust Division and law enforcement being more aware of anti-competitive crimes taking place. But if they're tight about how they read that and it's just the direct harm to the Postal Service, and also how long will these things take? Because this isn't going to happen quick. It's a pretty complicated process and the money has to flow from Postal, not the DOJ. How quickly, how much will they be paying? I think that's going to underscore the effectiveness and whether this really is a big deal or not.
So you and I are responding to the MOU that was made public in a press release from DOJ. But what is it going to take to actually operationalize this? To your last point, how is this going to play out in practice? And are there more rules to come? How do we get from MOU to practice?
Very good question. I think that it was a very thoughtful MOU. When I thought about some of the questions, I do think they tried to address them. So what does it mean to harm the Postal Service? There are a lot of exclusions for people. Like, it has to be original material. You can't learn that through illegal means. You can't learn it like I, as a lawyer, learning it, couldn't run in and get paid for it. Not surprising. A CPA, for instance, doing someone's taxes that uncovers it, couldn't. So how you collect the information matters. I think to operationalize it, they probably have a good framework in place between the Antitrust Division, I suspect the Procurement Collusion Strike Force, which is a group within that's traditionally done this kind of work. They're working with the Office of Inspector General of Postal. And it's pretty easy for a person to just report it. You could go on their website, you click around, you could Google whistleblower, antitrust whistleblower program. You can find it. You can report it. I think you'd have federal agents probably from the Postal Service showing up to talk to you. And then that process is probably going to take place as the investigation takes on. But a gating issue here is that they have to recover at least $1 million for this to kick in. So there's a lot of citizen complaints. I used to oversee that at the Antitrust Division a lot that really don't rise to the level of a prosecutable crime. And then on top of that there is recovery for the government of $1 million or more. So that is going to take time. But I think to operationalize it, they have the basics in place. But how quickly, how much will this money get paid out? Or I think it's going to take time for us to start seeing that. I'd be surprised if we see payouts within a year. Maybe we will. Maybe they'll be quick. And then that could incentivize more people to come in and self-report.
So I don't know if there are 10 people or 10,000 people waiting to make these kinds of whistleblower claims. But what do they need to know about this new program?
I think they need to understand the basics of antitrust crimes and what they are. So you Google the antitrust whistleblower program. They have a good website set up. They have some primers on what are you talking about, bid rigging, price fixing, market allocation. If you see about it, if you hear about it, they can click and report that. And then it's really the antitrust division along with, in this instance, the postal OIG to determine whether that is a crime, whether they will prosecute it, whether they recover. But if someone sees that conduct, they always could report it. The idea is just that they're incentivized by a payment. I suspect there's going to be a lot of lawyers that are going to try to make themselves available to whistleblowers that want to do that. We've seen that in the FCA, False Claims Act, and SEC space. So I think that market's going to arise. So people could do this themselves, but I suspect there's going to be whistleblower lawyers that will be more than happy to guide them through this process for potentially a cut in that reward.
I've been speaking with Ann O'Brien. She's a partner at Shepherd Mullen and co-leader of their Antitrust and Competition Practice Group. Thank you so much for helping us understand this program.
Thank you.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.